Hello, everyone. A very warm welcome to all of you and a very early good evening. Thank you so much for joining me for this live session, Secure Talks around Championing Customer Engagement, brought to you by ET in association with Palo Alto Networks and AWS. Now, in today's session, what we will be talking about is how an organization is enabling cloud security at scale with minimal manpower. Now, today we are looking at cloud as a key enabler for innovation and customer experience and the accelerated pace of digital transformation over the last 2 years has been made possible with cloud. What we have seen is an unprecedented pace of growth of the cloud footprint. Now, what this growing footprint also means is that managing security and compliance has become more complicated than ever before. Now, the inability to keep security at pace can also make cloud one of the biggest inhibitors. While we see cloud as a great enabler, security can lead to, or rather lack of security can lead to one of the biggest roadblocks in the growth of the company. Now, what this means is the need for a single unified platform that caters to multiple requirements, including multi-cloud visibility, compliance, governance, threat detection, vulnerability management, container security, and DevSecOps that can take cloud security to a whole new level. Now, one of the reasons most organizations struggle with their cloud security is the lack of such a platform which can give them a single pane of view across all the vulnerabilities, across all the threats in their cloud environment. Now, as the cloud environment grows, this security, or rather managing of security, becomes more complicated and more complex. In today's session, we will be talking to one such company that has managed in uncomplicating the security challenge with a unified platform. The company I'm talking about today is MoEngage, which is an insights-led customer engagement platform. Now, the company found the answer to its cloud security challenge in a multi-cloud environment in a comprehensive cloud-native security platform that helps manage cloud security at scale with minimal manpower. Now, some of the biggest challenges when it comes to managing multi-cloud security is managing security at scale while ensuring that the manpower costs are kept at minimum. At the same time, meeting regional and country-specific compliance and regulatory needs like GDPR, as well as the various privacy laws. And in India, the Indian privacy law is again a challenge for companies. Also, securing containerized workloads, meeting compliance and out-of-the-box policy coverage. All these are challenges that compound together to make cloud security a big challenge for the companies. Now, adding to this are sometimes the investment costs, because as you grow your cloud environment, so does your security cost also grow. So how do you keep the security cost at the minimum while ensuring that your cloud security is able to scale in tandem with the growing footprint? Now, in today's session, we will be talking to MoEngage to talk about how they are managing cloud security at scale with a comprehensive cloud platform. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Nitin Kotwal, Head of Security, and MoEngage to tell us more about their story with this cloud security platform. Welcome, Nitin. Thank you so much for joining me for this session.
Hello, Shipra. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much. So before I start my chat with Nitin, I would like to tell you that Nitin has over 14 years of experience and he has exposure across security domains and infosec and compliance with high level of proficiency in defining, implementing, and managing security administrative and logical controls from the scratch. So it will be a great pleasure and honor to talk to him about how he is ensuring cloud security for MoEngage. Thank you, Nitin, once again for joining me for this chat.
Thank you.
So Nitin, before we come to the cloud security aspect, I want you to tell us briefly about MoEngage's operations, about the company's growth into one of the leading insights-led customer engagement platforms, and how did you reach to this level?
Sure, definitely. So before I start, let me first tell you what exactly is Insights-led customer engagement platform means, right? So most of the marketing platforms are campaign-driven by design, right? What it means is, let's say you go to any marketing platform, you define your target audience with help of some keywords based on some general analytics, which is with provision on that platform itself, right? Or in the case, let's say you have an email address or maybe a mobile number of your customer. In that scenario, you define those customers and you define a campaign based on that. Now, what happens is when you define all these marketing campaigns with respect to this design or campaign driven flow, then it reduces the effectiveness of those campaigns because the person or your target might not be in need of that particular, say, product or the offer which you are providing to him. He might not be even aware of it, or he might not be in need of that particular itself. Right? So defining your marketing campaign catering to the unique customer preferences, exactly what is, I will say, customer engagement platform means is, right? Here we deal with the customer insights, right? And customer centric approach is something which MoEngage provide to deliver as a part of this particular platform. Now, just to ensure all the marketing team across the industries, across the regions, they can define the campaign which is logically relevant and personalized with respect to a specific consumer, right? For example, let's say you're going to purchase a mobile phone, and if you start getting the emails with respect to that particular mobile brand itself, or you get an offer with respect to that particular brand or a model type or something similar, it will lead to more engagement on that front. So that's exactly what the MoEngage does and assist organizations to have impact on their revenue, to grow their North Star business matrices, drive high retentions, and definitely having a long retention with your consumers itself, right? Now, if you talk about MoEngage, just a few example quoting on how effective these insight-led engagements can be. Like we assisted Vedantu to grow their 65% of their business, right, with the help of these insight-led engagement itself. Airtel Stream, right, we are able to achieve 85% of retention rate of their consumer, and definitely increasing the, I would say, per service consumption on their platform itself. Even let's say you have all these sales and all on the e-commerce platform. So similarly, we assisted Landmark to uplift around 56% of their marketing growth itself, right? Now, having told all of these things, definitely when we have to deal with these type of customers or the consumers, scale is definitely required on that front. So currently, MoEngage is having ability to reach around more than 1.1 billion of end user consumers every month, right? And its customer base includes few of the leading e-commerce, telecom, financial institutes like Nestle, Samsung, Dish Telecom, Flipkart, Airtel, and many more, right? So from the scale prospect, to handle all of these things, we send around 76 billion push messages, around 1.3 billion emails delivered, or you can say we cater around 150 billion plus events tracked every month across the customer base. So definitely, handling this much part of scale, cloud is one of the key requirements at MoEngage.
So Nitin, you very rightly pointed out when you're talking about scale, cloud therefore becomes a big enabler for you, for you to enable that kind of scale that you're talking about. Now, how critical is cloud to your business, and how are you leveraging it to operate a truly agile, scalable, and innovative customer engagement platform that you have? And if you can tell us a little bit about your cloud footprint, for instance, in terms of the multi-cloud environment, the hybrid cloud environment? What kind of cloud environment do you have to enable the kind of business operations that you have?
Okay, so as I told, MoEngage provide the SaaS offering, right, to its customers. So definitely cloud is at the SaaS, core of the SaaS platform itself, right? It becomes a critical asset for MoEngage. And when we tap into the cloud environments like your AWS, it definitely helps MoEngage to scale rapidly based on the workload itself, right? It assists us to handle queries irrespective of traffic and complexity, which definitely leads to the faster decision making itself. A simple scenario, let's say uh, some e-commerce vendor is having some sale campaign, right? You have sale campaigns on the Sundays, Wednesday, Fridays, right? You have seen all the e-commerce websites. Now, if that particular vendor or e-commerce website is MoEngage customer, definitely they would like to have a real-time insights on what the customers or their consumers are doing on their platform. So all these insight leds, definitely the traffic is more, you require more resources to handle that stuff. And that's exactly what the cloud assists us to define. To build systems more quickly with the limited resources available, because we can always automate these things with the help of cloud services and all the stuff around it. And definitely it can boost the project timelines on that front. Not only this, when cloud also assists us to expand worldwide, right? Due to its global presence of secure data centers, so we don't have to worry about physical security of data center. That's something which a cloud provider will take care of it. But it can assist us to handle the global customer or global client needs based on their compliance need, based on the regional needs and all those stuff around it. Yeah, so I guess now sorry, I forgot the next part of your query itself.
So if you can give us a little bit more information about your cloud environment in terms of what is your footprint like, whether it is multi-cloud, hybrid cloud, what kind of different cloud environments that you have in your cloud footprint?
Sure. So it's, as I told earlier, right? So we deliver all services across the regions, across the industries, right? And we have to deal with the regional security guidelines and the practices around it. So definitely we have a multi-regional cloud environment in place. Now, since customer footprint is across the regions, we have to deal with all this privacy regulation or security regulations across, like UK, they focus more on GDPR, US, they focus more on CCPA. Now, recently, Indonesia have the OJK compliances. Even in India, the government IT requirements and even the RBI guidelines for the financial sector. So definitely, yes, we deal with the multi-region, multi-environment, and definitely it acts as the cloud environment act as a single source of truth, so we can assure customers on our security and compliance needs.
So when you say that your customers actually depend on you for all their customer engagement, aspects, all their customer engagement requirements, and then you depend on cloud to enable, to deliver those insights that can help them with their customer engagement. Now, if cloud is at the center of your business, how critical does cloud security become for you? And you did mention about the need for catering to different compliance requirements in a multi-region environment. So if you can give us some idea as to how cloud security is actually critical to your business operations, and in fact, lack of it can actually hinder your business operations.
Definitely. So as I told, cloud is at the core of SaaS services, right? And definitely the cloud security become one of the key aspects here, because now as our customers are sharing the data with us, definitely they require assurance that whatever information they are sharing, it's safe. It is only used in a scoped operations. The systems which are processing their informations are redundant in nature, right? To counter any particular potential attack itself. Along with that, they also require that, hey, your environment should be scalable and definitely reliable on that front itself. So I would consider cloud security as a business enabler for us instead of obligation towards our customer. It assists us handling the cloud security and requirements, assists us to build trust with the MoEngage services, practices, business to our customers, right? And I guess the leading brands under MoEngage customer space definitely showcase that stuff itself. Now, just to add, MoEngage delivers services across the regions and industries. So definitely a balance between the scale deliverabilities and different regulatory standards regulations needs to be done. So it definitely becomes mission critical for our business itself.
Now, one thing that definitely is true in today's context is that security, and including cloud security, and because most of the operations, or rather the IT environment, is actually moving, shifting towards cloud, and therefore cloud security is at the fulcrum of brand, protecting your brand, protecting the trust that your customers have in the brand. So therefore, one cannot really overstate how critical security and cloud security is to any business operations today. Now, in your context, considering the scale that you are looking at, and if you look at the way your business operations have grown, when you were answering my first question, I was thinking about, as you grow your operations, you've grown your cloud footprint at the same time. Now, but the scaling up security at the same pace can be quite challenging. So, and can you tell us how the inability to scale up security at pace with the growth of cloud footprint can make cloud one of the biggest inhibitors? Because as your cloud footprint grew to keep pace with your business growth, what challenges were you facing in scaling up your cloud security requirements accordingly?
Sure. So, see, cloud security has its own challenges, right? Due to scale of services we are having, or the infrastructure which is required to manage it. But also handling secure operations, like it's not only challenging with respect to the environment, but handling the operations, like handling the effective access management, handling the effective monitoring of the environment, right? And all of these things are required to, while maintaining the resiliency and availability of the platform itself. Now, the key to tackle these challenges lies, I will say, consider in 3 steps. The step 1 is you stick to your security basics, right? Because if the security basics are correct in the environment or in your processes, the things will smoothly follow on that stuff. The second part is you try to integrate security in your life cycle itself, right? Instead of once you have deployed it, then you look into the security of it. Instead of that, if you define it in the life cycle itself, it becomes much more easier operations for you. And definitely continuous innovation to ensure you have a correct set of proactive and reactive controls in place, right? Now, all of these different standards, compliances, regulation, we consider as a quality gate for us, right? So that all the things are aligned with each other. A simple example, let's say we start security from the requirement phase itself. Now, some service has to be deployed. In that scenario, we ensure whether it is meeting all the security requirements itself for us, or it is meeting the compliance requirement itself based on the processing it is doing and the stuff around it, right? So it assists us to tackle the low-hanging fruits with respect to security threats and all. Now, once the requirement, or you can say a PRD document, has been defined, then comes your design phase. You do all the threat modeling. You try to identify the potential risk or the threats in that design itself. So again, another layer of security checks you are doing initially itself to build resiliency in the software itself or in your architecture itself. Then definitely followed by your secure coding, testing, integrating security controls in your CI/CD pipeline, right? Or building a secure software altogether. Now, once all of these things are done, then definitely continuous monitoring and auditing is definitely required. And that can be easily achieved with the help of platforms like unified platforms like Prisma Cloud and multiple others. So it drives all the innovations to define all these scalable controls or resilient controls on that front. I will say, another part which I can also say, which enables us, is the security training in the environment, right? So if you have a well-informed resources or well-trained resources, it's always easy for the security team to define the controls, to showcase the severity of the findings or the risk in the environment and the effective ways to control or tackle that. Yeah.
Now, considering that you're operating in a multi-cloud and multi-region environment, how did it create complexities for you around managing security and the compliance requirements, and why did you find a unified cloud native security platform the right fit to manage all your cloud security needs with a single pane view of the threats and vulnerabilities across your entire cloud environment?
So as I told earlier, right? So multi-region deployment faces a lot of challenges, right? In cloud operations, maintenance, availability, and all those stuff around it, right? But in our case, we consider it as a blessing in disguise from the security point of view, right? Because it assists us to define or segregate security and compliance requirements with respect to each region or with respect to industrial need, right? Now, in India, RBI says that, hey, you need to have a data localization being defined. Europe says that you need to align with GDP, or UK says that, US says that you have to align with CCP, and multiple other compliances or regulations comes into picture. So distributing the environment in multiple regions assists us to define the controls based on those regional regulations and the standard requirement. That's one use case which I can see, or a blessing which we can have. Another part is when you talk from the security prospect, segregating access to handle the cloud operations and all, that's also become one of the key important things. Right now, as I told, stick to the basics. Right now, if I can easily segregate the privileges, define access management with the help of, let's say, need to know basis, right? Without segregating all these controls and everything, it becomes much more easier for the team to manage and define the secure practices around, right? So multi-region definitely have some security challenges, like effective and continuous monitoring of your resources is one of that, but using the existing technologies like a Prisma Cloud and all, we can always overcome them, right? Now, what the unified platform assists us is enable us to define effective and granular monitoring across the regions, right? Right now, with the help of these tools, like we can monitor all the SaaS infrastructure as well as its resources. We can even monitor each and every change happening in the environment, your logs, workloads, and ensure it's all aligned with your best practices and standards requirements, right? So this also acts as a single interface for us to easily evaluate, audit, monitor, and even push automated reactive controls in the environment, overall giving us a Hawkeye view, right? You can say on any unapproved changes, operations, or compliance deviations in the environment, right? So definitely, when you deal with multi-region, so unified environment or unified platform to monitor everything is one of the, you can say, a good technology to have, right?
Prisma Cloud provided you that kind of visibility across your entire cloud platform. If you can give us a little more details in terms of how Prisma Cloud actually helped you in building a robust security posture for the company in the cloud.
See, when we talk about the robust and compliant cloud environment, that there are three key things, right? You need to have a granular monitoring of the resources or the infrastructure. You need to have a proper auditing in place. Along with that, you need to have an effective posture correction controls defined in the environment. So Prisma Cloud assists us in all of the three wings, right? It assists us in handling the change monitoring across the region as a single platform so that we can always audit the configurations, deployment, what users are doing, what systems are being doing, right? Even the workloads, we can also monitor with the help of that. Now, another threat when you talk about the SaaS providers is your insider threats, right? Or misuse of access controls and all. So as Prisma is assisting us in continuously auditing I will say, all the changes been made, or it also assists us in keeping an eye on each and every environment, or you can say a resource, what the resources are doing on the region itself. Definitely it assists us on that front itself. Now, along with that, we can also define the reactive controls with the help of Prisma Cloud. So let's say if any change goes unapproved in the environment or as per the part of process, we can always counter it easily and notify the stuff around it. Now, another robust software requirement is to ensure having proper software composite analysis, right? We're dealing with the applications here, but definitely developers would be using multiple open source software packages. They were building all those packages as a part of CI system itself. So Prisma Cloud also features in that particular process where it can scan all the used open source packages. Even we can integrate in our CI pipeline so that it can scan all these builds, images, and the underlying code itself.
In fact, if we are looking at cloud security in a multi-cloud, multi-region environment, cost becomes a critical factor. And in fact, cost is one of the biggest concerns when it comes to scaling up cloud security in tandem with the expansion of the cloud footprint. And that is one of the biggest challenges and inhibitors that organizations face when they need to scale up their cloud security. So how did the flexible subscription and payment options from Palo Alto and AWS help you in minimizing the costs and optimize ROI on your cloud security?
Sure. So that is one of the primary conflict points with security team and finance team in any organization, right? The problem is the license model of most of these vendors or the tools itself, right? Now, as an organization, I always want to consider a limited license based on my average consumption of the tool, right? Or the utilization of the tool. But most of the organization or the tools define the license based on your peak time. Like in my peak time, I might be required 100 license, just example, right? But average, I'm only requiring 60 to 70. It is only for certain time I require the more number of licenses. So definitely, Prisma Cloud license model assists us in that frame, right, where they can take the average consumption of the infrastructure at the regular interval and define the license consumption or license requirement based on that itself. Now, another part is the flexibility which Prisma provides us to integrate this license cost with our AWS regular billing itself, right? So it assists us in effective planning and distributing security budget across the year instead of focusing, let's say, also big bulk of amount in the initial stage of the financial year itself. We can distribute it easily, right? So a good thing for the finance team itself on that front. Now, as MoEngage is also a long-term partner with AWS with long time, right? So definitely we host our SaaS infra on their cloud and entertain all the regular benefits in help of terms of cost, availability, assistance in early adoption of technologies or easy adoption of technologies, right? So that we can always innovate services due to all this flexible license model.
How did the flexible payment options, how did it help you optimize your ROI in terms of cloud security? Did it help you achieve better ROI?
Definitely. So as I told, right? So what the Prisma does, it takes an average of whatever you are consuming throughout the month, right? And the license cost is defined based on that itself. So I can always define or I can always showcase as an ROI that, hey, this month, since the load was less, I'm only consuming, let's say 100 license. This month, the load was slightly higher because we're handling the X campaigns for X customers or Y customers. So definitely it assists on that front itself, right?
So towards the end, if you have any words of advice for other security leaders in terms of how they can scale up their cloud security better.
Sure. So as what I have told, I just try to summarize a part of this, right? So the first part is like always look for to integrate controls across your life cycle instead of focusing at the end or focusing on the, let's say, once the things are deployed and handle the stuff. Once you integrate, it becomes easier and manageable for you, right? Second part is use innovations or the technologies to solve problem in the right way, right? Instead of taking a shortcuts on that front. But hey, this particular thing is not working, let's shut it down, right? So try to make use of technologies on that front. Along with that, in parallel, you also need to be robust and open to logically adopt these new, I'll say, services, new tools, new, I will say, technologies, right? So that you can cope up with this all the dynamically evolving security needs or the business need itself, right? And as you are adopting these new technologies, or you're open to adopt these new technologies, handling all these security risks in the scalable environment become much more easier and effective for you.
Absolutely. Thank you for your words of advice. In fact, I completely agree with you. How organizations need to look at technology to find answers to their challenges. And the example that we have in front of today is the native cloud security platform that you spoke about in detail, that is Prisma Cloud, and how that is enabling you to scale up cloud security without without having to scale up your investments and costs at the same scale, at the same pace. So with that, I would like to thank you so much, Nitin, for your for this lovely chat, and it was quite insightful to get to know more about how you're leveraging the platform to scale up your cloud security requirements. Thank you once again. And with that, I would now like to move to our next session, and I would like to invite Mr. Ashish Ramesh, Prisma Cloud Sales Specialist at Palo Alto, India. Ashish leads the cloud security business at Palo Alto Networks for North and East India. And prior to Palo Alto, he led cloud security and consumer identity businesses across India and ANZ with a penchant for cloud security technology. He has also managed various technical roles encompassing consulting, architect, and pre-sales. So please join me in welcoming Ashish. So Ashish, over to you.
Thanks, Shipra. Thanks a lot. How are you doing? So thanks, everyone. My name is Ashish. As Shipra introduced, I manage the Prisma Cloud business here at Palo Alto Networks for North, East, and South. I want to thank you guys for attending the session today. I'll take this opportunity to sort of quickly walk you through our view of how do you sort of envisage securing your cloud deployments, right? It's a very quick overview of Prisma Cloud. I'll walk you from left to right, these five core pillars when it comes to Prisma Cloud from left. If you look at the DevSecOps space, this is primarily, when your code is ready, you've put it through your SaaS systems, you're ready to deploy it on your cloud infrastructure. The first thing you would do is probably try and automate that infrastructure deployment, right? And for which you would use ISE templates. And when I talk about ISE templates, I'm talking about CloudFormation templates, Terraform, etc. Now, what happens when you use infrastructure as code templates to automate your infrastructure is if there are misconfigurations or some security gaps in these templates when the developers have built it, then you have insecure infrastructure being deployed at scale, right? So one of the first things we need to do is when we're automating infrastructure deployment is to sort of fix all of this, all of these ISE templates, so that there is no infrastructure being deployed at scale which has security risks in them. The second vertical is our cloud security posture management piece. It specifically works on securing your cloud infrastructure, provides you great visibility. It does a lot of compliance stuff for you. It looks into a lot of threats, and we have multiple security policies, and I'll walk you through that in detail in the next upcoming slides. And it has a lot of machine learning capabilities, sort of understand and benchmark your network behavior and user behavior, etc., and then sort of catch drifts from that regular behavior. We also do a whole bunch of data security stuff to look for, any sensitive information in your cloud and how we sort of protect them from malware and also being exposed to the public internet. The third vertical, what we talk about once your infrastructure is up and ready, is your workloads, what you deploy on your cloud, right? How do you sort of protect these hosts? How do you protect these applications? And most of the customers today, especially the likes of Mo Engages and the digital native companies today, are using containers, are using PaaS services from cloud service providers, and they're building true modern app stacks, right? So we want to talk about how do you sort of secure these modern app stacks, and we also talk about how do these modern app stacks are protected inherently, also in conjunction with services like web application firewalls and API security. The last but not the least, we'll also talk a bit about our identity-based microsegmentation and then our IAM security as well, right? And IAM is extremely critical. There are a lot of users today in disparate teams, as maybe vendors, and then there are a lot of resources and roles. How do you sort of manage all of these IAM resources and secure all of them is what we'll talk about. I'll move on to my first slide, and this is IIT Security. Palo Alto Networks acquired Bridgecrew recently. They were the leaders in IIT Security. As I said, more and more companies are using IIT templates to sort of automate infrastructure deployment. And when they're building these Terraform templates or CloudFormation templates, generally it's sort of gives rise to a lot of security gaps. For example, let's say there's an insecure S3 bucket, which is open to the public internet, or there is some default, admin privileges which are given out. How do we sort of fix all of this? And this needs to be fixed before the infrastructure actually gets deployed, right? When the user or the developer is sort of building this. So we can sort of prompt users to fix stuff as and when they're developing, right at their IDE level. So they fix all these security gaps at the IDE level. And then once they do that, they can then push it to GitHub or any repo where they want to sort of push those templates to. And then again, that repo and that integration with that repo allows Prisma Cloud's bridge crew capability or the IIT Security capability to sort of scan those templates. And then only then, if it's clean, it will allow it to connect back to the main branch. If not, it will reject it. So this is a way we sort of help set up security guardrails, so that only clean scanned templates sort of get attached to the main branches of the repos here. Once that's done, it gets into the CI/CD pipeline. You can again have another round of scanning if you want before this Terraform template or the CFT template helps you deploy your infrastructure, right? So very high level overview of IIT Security. We would love to have some individual conversations if you folks are using IIT Security or are using IIC, and then if you're looking for security tools to sort of secure those IIC templates. It's one way to sort of ensure that a clean infrastructure is deployed, as opposed to deploying an infrastructure and then going about sort of cleaning that entire infrastructure up, right? So extremely important step in deploying your infrastructure. Now, when you deploy that infrastructure, these infrastructures could be in different regions across the globe, right? Not one specific region. AWS has regions across the globe, so you could deploy it in multiple regions. It could also be multi-cloud in some situations. And these applications also could be distributed, right? Now, when you have such a distributed ecosystem, when businesses like MoEngage who are catering to multiple geographies, multiple continents, multiple end users, how do you sort of give security practitioners that visibility or that view into their deployment, right? Globally, on one single pane of glass, and say, hey, this is what you've deployed in these regions. These are the services, these are the resources. Probably these are the misconfigurations, what you need to sort of fix. Just keep in mind, most of the times when you are setting up infrastructures manually, it always leads to a lot of misconfigurations, and these misconfigurations could be your primary reason to sort of for security breaches, right? Somebody left an S3 bucket open, a database is not encrypted. A lot of such simple human error driven challenges, security gaps go a long way in sort of causing harm to a company. So how do we sort of identify these misconfigurations? How do we fix them? That's the first thing we look into. Second, Palo Alto Networks being a very large firewall company, and that's how we started off. We have a lot of deployment globally in some of the top institutions across the globe, across verticals, and all of that threat intel flows into Prisma Cloud. So we have a very healthy threat intel information flowing into the platform, so that our customers who are deployed in the cloud can sort of leverage that threat intel information, and we can benchmark saying, hey, this is how a customer's infrastructure should behave in a good behavior scenario or under normal circumstances. Any deviation from that, we can trigger off alerts and say something anomalous is happening. 3, any audit related events, multiple login attempts on a specific account, users going, user behavior anomalies, extremely important, right? Think of Ashish coming on to an AWS platform every morning from Bangalore from a Mac operating system, XYZ IP addresses, and then he's making changes to, let's say, EC2 instances. All of a sudden, Ashish comes from a Windows operating system, from, let's say, Delhi or Russia or wherever, and starts making changes to database instances. That's anomalous behavior, and that needs to be triggered out. So behavior anomaly is another thing which we look into very granularly, so that regardless of who's accessing your cloud, we understand their behavior, benchmark that behavior, and any deviation from that normal behavior, we trigger off alerts. And of course, I also covered IAM. I know it was a different vertical in the previous slide, but it falls under the purview of the cloud. Net effective permissions of resources and roles is extremely important. You need to understand what is the permission levels Ashish should have for his role in that organization. He may need just access to 2 resources to do his job every day, but if you give him access to 10 services or probably everything in your cloud, then that's a recipe for disaster, right? So it's our algorithms sort of identify the permissions what Ashish should have, and then it sort of recommends to the security team as to how do you sort of manage and mitigate that blast radius, if I may. And of course, resources as well, right? There are a lot of resources. A lot of resources may be exposed to a lot of people. You need to ensure the permissions what are given to those roles and resources are kept to a minimum. So at a very high level, this is how you go about sort of ensuring the security posture of your, cloud infrastructure. Now, something very closely associated to all of this is, of course, compliance, right? Now, there are, of course, security policies, and then when those security policies trigger, they must be triggering off some kind of a compliance gap. And we cover a whole bunch of compliance checks, right? And when I'm talking about compliance here, I'm talking about GDPR, PCI DSS, ISO, CCPA, yada stuff, right? Now, Prisma Cloud not only helps you check technically if you're compliant with these compliance checks, but it also gives you the provision to create custom compliance reports, right? Based on what your company needs and tie them back to custom security policies. For example, Nitin was mentioning about how he wants to be compliant with GDPR. Now, what we could do is we could, let's say, have a security policy which would say any request which would be coming from out of Europe. Let's say if a user in Europe is being served data from out of Europe, right? Then I can set a security policy saying trigger an alert. And then I can tie that back to a GDPR compliance check and say, whenever the security policy triggers an alert, then you alert the security team saying it's a gap in GDPR, and then you can go about fixing it. So on and so forth. So this is how we sort of help our customers be compliant with all the compliances they need to sort of comply with. Now, the third most important thing is once you secure your cloud, you're compliant, is how do you sort of secure your data, right? Now, 2 ways. One is it shouldn't be exposed to the public internet, so that it's not publicly accessible or by rogue users. 2, how do you sort of ensure there's no threat in that data itself, right? Like malware and stuff. So a couple of things we do. We work with AWS to sort of integrate their S3 buckets. So we scan all of their S3 buckets to ensure that none of those S3 buckets or the objects are exposed to the public internet. And we can also classify this data to say, hey, this is PI information, this is health information, or this is financial FII information. And this is all sensitives, right? So we can classify if something what we have out of the box, which we define as sensitive, is not there. You can define it yourself and then sort of secure that information. Now you can also do a complete malware scan. And this is done using something what we call Wildfire at Palo Alto Networks. It's the largest malware detection engine of its kind. And it gets intel from the entire Palo Alto Networks security solution suite. So a lot of information getting into Wildfire, which helps you do malware scans on S3 buckets, right? So extremely important to sort of run these checks on the data you store. And it's more relevant in today's world when there's a lot of UGC content and a lot of user generated content being uploaded onto S3 buckets, right? It could be your, Aadhaar card, or it could be a PAN card, whatever you're uploading to, businesses across the board who are giving you services. So you need to ensure that A, that data is not exposed to the public internet. B, you need to ensure that there's no malware or anything which is malicious in those files, in those objects, right, which could sort of disrupt your entire infrastructure. So 3 core building blocks for us from our perspective, along with IAM security. So that's 4 core building blocks when you have to look at infrastructure as a whole. Now, I'll just segue into workload protection, and I talk about why is it important, or why should one look at doing this in the first place, right? Now, think of a traditional setup in the legacy days. The developers, they would develop something using their IDEs, they would give a jar file, And then it would go to an ops team and they would deploy it in the data center. And then let's say there was a vulnerability detected, then they would patch that, and then everybody was good to go. Application was safe, even though it was running in production. Sort of switch over to today, and the same developers are building that application. Now there's, the DevOps teams, and then what the DevOps teams do is the developers put this in GitHub. The DevOps team helps sort of deploy all of this using a CI/CD pipeline, and then that gets into production on your cloud environment. And I'm talking about modern app stacks here, right? When your DevOps team comes in, you're trying to work with containers, PaaS services, etc. And that's how you're deploying applications. Now, the only change is when there's a vulnerability detected here in a containerized application, it's not the same as before, right? You cannot just go patch that, because you got to remember containers are scaling up and scaling down, and they're ephemeral in nature, in the sense that they exist or they stay only for a brief amount of time, and then they get killed based on the load of traffic what that customer is experiencing. So when a vulnerability is detected, what happens is you'll need to go back to the development team and request them to rewrite the image based on which that containerized application was put in place in production, right? Now, while the backend teams are doing all of this to fix those vulnerabilities, your application continues to run in a vulnerable mode. Yes, you can have WAFs. WAFs are negative signature-based models. If there's a signature which can protect you against an attack, yes. If there's a zero-day vulnerability, if there's a supply chain attack, then there's no way that WAF can protect, and then it comes straight through. So till the time they fix all of those vulnerabilities in the backend, and then go back through the same cycle through the GitHub to pushing it to your repo, and then using the CI/CD pipelines to put the application back in production, your applications are running in vulnerable mode. And this is the primary reason security has truly moved left, which the market calls a shift left security, where we want to sort of secure applications and give some of the responsibilities of securing applications back to the developers, instead of sort of getting these applications into production and then sort of trying to secure them, right? This is the primary reason. And I'm more than happy to have this discussion with anybody on the call who wants to have this discussion after the call. Would love to sort of engage and discuss this further. Now, that brings me to why and how we sort of have architected our container security along with traditional services like WAF. We have that as well, but why is container security so important, right? Now, there are a lot of images. Developers download that from the internet, start using those images. Somebody makes some changes, puts it back in the repo. There are a couple of other developers in the same organization, picks it up and starts using them again. Now, all of a sudden, you have a scenario where there's an entire organization using insecure images. Now, these images would become your base to your applications and your critical business-driven applications, and that's what would be running in production. Now, all of these images, because they're downloaded from the internet, could have vulnerabilities, could have severe compliance gaps. And what we want to do is we want to start here, right, at the development phase, right? We have something called a CLI, which basically developers can integrate so that we can sort of fix all of these vulnerabilities and compliance gaps here, right? So what I would say, what I would call shift left, anything before it goes into production. So this entire space here, which I've labeled as dev and CI/CD pipeline, anything which you can catch here and fix here, it's best for you and your organization, right? So you can set up some security baseline. You can say, hey, these are some base images which are scanned, which a security team can say, this is what we recommend all of you developers to use. Because if you download anything from the internet, then you're putting your entire organization at risk. So we help scan those images, put it in the repo. Now, developers sort of start downloading those images, start working on them. They put it in, a GitHub or wherever that is, and then they put it through CI/CD pipeline. Once it gets to the registry, we can again scan those images at the registry where those images are sitting at rest. We can scan them. We can create a security gate here and say, if the risk score of these images is 8 and above, and we have a unique way of sort of giving a risk score to your images, right? And that's basically, if we find vulnerabilities, if we find compliance gaps in your images, we'll then sort of refer that back to your deployment, to your ecosystem, and then give you a score, basically to say how much does this impact your ecosystem or your deployment, right? How much does this vulnerability impact you? Based on that, we give it a score. Now, you can say, hey, if the score is 8 and above, send this back to the developer so that he or she can sort of fix those issues before they put it back through the CI/CD pipeline, right? So this is the way we fix a majority of the chunk of images before they ever see the light of day in production environments. But once they get into the production environments, it's a whole different ball game altogether, right? This is runtime environments. There are real user traffic. There are attackers as well. It's prone to zero-day vulnerabilities. It's prone to supply chain attacks, which can come from internal. There could be malware. There could be a whole bunch of stuff. So how do we go about runtime security? I explained to you about the shift left security, which we do right here. But what do we do in runtime? So we, of course, have a WAS service, which is a web application firewall and API security service. When a request comes in, if it's an API request, we pass the request. If it's a regular request, HTTP request comes through. There are about, there are multiple risk groups which we put all these requests through. If there's a match in signature, then we say this request is anomalous in nature, and then we can deny it. Now, the limitation with WAS, and I'm talking about WAS or WAFs globally, is it's always a negative security model limited by the signature set, what it possesses, and the signature updates what it receives from that company's threat intel team, right? And it's the same with everybody, including us. Now, we've gone one step ahead and said, hey, let's put that negative security model to look into all the incoming requests. But over and above that, whatever, let's say, comes through that WAS, an attack, because the WAS won't catch it because of the general nature of how WASs are architected, we have a runtime positive security model where we can whitelist application processes. We can whitelist network calls. We can whitelist files, within a containerized app, and say, hey, under a normal scenario, if this application were to behave like how the developer intended it to behave, it would run XYZ processes. It would run ABC. It would make ABC network calls, and these are the files which would be present within that containerized app. Now, in a production scenario, if the application has no anomalies, if the application has no malware, if the application has no attacks, then this is all it should run, and there should be nothing apart from this. The minute I find an additional process, the second we find an additional network call or there's an additional file, we understand and we realize something's wrong, and there could be an attack, and then we can either alert the security teams or deny that process or that network call or that file from executing, right? So it's extremely important how to use such runtime security measures to protect your applications, especially your business critical applications. So first level of defense and runtime could be your WAFs, could be your API security, but that's just not good enough. You need additional runtime capabilities like what I just walked you through, which is more of a positive security model to protect your applications in runtime, right? Now, if you could just look through whatever I explained, Prisma Cloud is a proactive detection and remediation tool, right? It's not waiting for an attack to happen to say, hey, you just got attacked and this could possibly be an attack. What we are doing is we are trying to tell you that these are the areas of improvement from a security posture perspective, right from your infrastructure as code to your infrastructure deployment itself and the applications which you deploy. And how do you proactively go about sort of fixing all of this so that you can prevent an attack from happening, right? That's what we're trying to do. I'll just quickly summarize what I was just walking you guys through. And I talked through an infrastructure deployment first. I talked through an application deployment next. So let's say you're automating infrastructure. You need something like an IIT Security. We have Rich Crew from Prisma Cloud, help scan IIT templates, clean them up before developers can sort of push their templates into GitHub repos. Then we can again scan those CFT or Terraform templates there. It's 100% automable so that you can find, fix, and eliminate sort of misconfigurations. Then you can put them to CI/CD pipelines, and then that Terraform template sort of helps deploy your infrastructure. We can also have a security gate here to do a recheck if required, and then the infrastructure gets deployed, right? This is from an infrastructure deployment perspective. Now, if you have to look at, sorry, the last part, when you deploy an infrastructure, you have to ensure that 80% of your infrastructure, of course, there are incidents, and there could be, SOC incidents kind of situations where human intervention is required, where people need to look into a specific situation before they go about sort of fixing it or denying that request or that person. But 80% or a majority of percentage of your security risk should be automable in nature, so that you can set security baselines, and you need to have a way of sort of automating these security fixes. And Prisma Cloud out of the box provides you such functionality where you can set a security baseline and you can say, hey, if it does not match the security baseline, and if there's any deviation, sort of go on and automatically sort of fix them so that there's no human intervention required. It's all about how do you sort of remove that human intervention and sort of make this automatable in nature. Second one, I'll go on talking about the application deployment. Same stuff. Developers are working with images. We give twist CLIs so that they can scan for vulnerabilities, compliance checks. They push it into repos. Goes back into the CI/CD pipeline, right? And then from that CI/CD pipeline goes into a registry. We can scan this registry if you for images at rest in that registry for vulnerabilities, compliances. And then again, we can have security gates to enforce some kind of guardrails. It's 100% automatable again. There's no requirement for human intervention. If there's an issue here, it sort of pushes that back to the developer for him or her to fix it. And then you come back to, and once everything is clean, code gets deployed, gets back into runtime. And now, more importantly, you need to run your workload protection, which is a combination of your web application firewall, API security, as well as your runtime security, right? And again, a good portion of this is automatable. Since these are business critical applications, we can automate about 60 to 70% of this, but 30 to 40%, you might need some kind of human intervention to look into those alerts and sort of take a decision. So except for this part here in runtime and this part here in runtime, the entire security process, whether it's infrastructure deployment, whether it's application deployment, you should look to automate those security flows, and that's how you go about sort of protecting your cloud deployments. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Ashish, for that session. Nitin, if I could ask you to be back on the camera, because we will be taking up a few audience questions. Since we are already running out of time, but I would like to still take up one or two of them, whatever we can answer in the short time. So Nitin, there is a question for you, which is, what is the most important aspect that a security team should take into consideration for hybrid and cloud environments?
Whether it's a hybrid environment or a cloud environment, there are three, I will say, parts of security which you need to ensure. First is managing your access management, right? Second is monitoring or handling your config plane. And third is managing and handling your data plane in the environment, right? Access control, as it says, that it relies on what you're giving access to individuals. Now, whether it's a hybrid environment or it's a cloud environment, in both the scenarios, you need to have a proper segregation of duties, RBAC controls defined, permissions defined, and the stuff around it. Then when we talk about the config plane, it deals with the security of whatever the configurations changes are happening in the environment, right? Now, those configuration changes can be detected directly from the resources, or maybe from your audit logs, or I'll say VPC logs, or whatever it is. So monitoring of your config plane is something which is also equally important here, right? That's where you can always monitor any unidentified changes happening in the infrastructure or the resources. You can define your change management practices. You can define your reactive controls accordingly. And that's exactly what most of these compliances also talk about, right? They say that, hey, your database should be encrypted. You should have a privilege of least privilege, principle of least privilege being followed. That's what all they talk about, right? So handling the config plane. And the third part is your data plane. Whatever data is coming in and out of the environment, the monitoring of it. That's exactly what your SOC center talks about, right? Or your application firewalls talk about, or your infrastructure firewalls talk about. they monitor all the packet flows, identify with respect to signatures or behavior based, right? And provide the monitoring aspects on that front. So yeah, in both the environments, three aspects are required. One is handling your access management properly. Second is monitoring and managing your conflict plane. And third, definitely monitoring and managing your data plane from the security side.
Great, thank you. I think those are really good, rather important considerations that security teams should take into account and keep handling with them. One question for you, Ashish, if there would be an attack, how would it be detected by users or automatically? This is in the context of your solution.
Right. So as I was saying, right, the approach is to ensure that there's proactive detection and mitigation or remediation of issues which could lead to an attack. For example, if there's a misconfiguration of an S3 bucket, which could be open to the public internet, and if we have automatically sort of shut that off and ensure that there is no access anymore to that S3 bucket, the idea is that the attack wouldn't even happen, right? Now, this is a security baseline what we set, and then we fix them automatically so that there's no attack which happens. I'm talking from an infrastructure perspective, right? This is how we go about fixing infrastructure. Now, because we receive information via API calls from AWS directly with their network logs or their audit logs or config logs, this is actual factual real-time information which we are receiving from the cloud, and we're fixing them well in advance so that there is no room for an issue or an attack to happen. That's from an infra perspective. That's our view of security. If there is a breach, I mean, of course, there are security incidents which will be created, etc., which if you're in an alert mode, then your SOC team can look into it and sort of better identify how did that happen, right? But prevention is better than sort of identifying an attack itself, after it has happened. From an application perspective, as I said, we try, and again, prevention is the method when it comes to shift left security. We try and ensure that everything is sort of fixed before an application gets into production. But if an application gets into production and there are vulnerabilities, like for example, 0-day vulnerabilities, like the log4j vulnerability, which came up recently, or if there is, some compliance gaps, some containers were started in, a privileged mode, right? How do you fix that? Or if there is a supply chain attack, right? Which happened with SolarWinds and stuff like that. That's when our runtime security model comes into play. It's bulletproof in the sense that think of how the developer has developed your application, right? And he or she would have said, hey, these are the only 10 things which this application should do, and that's how I am developing it. And if my solution has an automated way of learning those capabilities and then sort of putting up a security policy to say, I will keep monitoring this application in a way that I will ensure it's always within this boundary or within this framework what this developer developed, and anything outside of it I'm going to consider as anomalous. That's your positive security model. So it's an easier way to sort of say what is nice or what is good and what is bad, and that's how we go about protecting it when it comes to modern app stacks. And of course, we have our web application firewall as well to sort of provide a defense in depth approach, so that there is a negative security model when a request comes in, and then there's a positive security model with our runtime security. That's how we go about protecting it. If there's an attack, and if there is something anomalous, there are ways we have integrations with your SIM tools, which can be integrated with your SOA tools. We can do Jira integrations. So there are multiple ways where we can integrate multiple tools at your backend, so the right teams are informed so that they can take immediate action on them.
Right, thanks. So let me briefly take just two more questions before we wrap up. Nitin, there's a question for you. How to integrate DevOps and security practices, if you can have a few recommendations on that.
DevOps practice is all about, you can break it in two parts, right? One is your CI and another one is your CD, correct? Now, integrations, continuous integration of CI, which you can call it as where we try to build the code itself, right? So the good, I will say, controls which you can always ensure up there is, and which can also act as a quality gate for you. One is your software composite analysis tools, right? So once the image has been built, it can always, or monitor, it can do a vulnerability scan, it can do an open source review scan, and all of these things in that particular image itself, right? Then definitely you are integrating the code and all of these things. So definitely integrating with your static code analyzer and all those stuff can also assist on that front. Now, once the image has been deployed, I'll say defined, then it comes to your deployment stage, right? You have to deploy those images in the form of container or maybe some instances, whatever it is, right? Now, once it is deployed, then definitely your config reviews what you are deploying. Vulnerability scan, again, of the servers which you have deployed, right? Which also includes not only your code, but also the operating system on which that code is being deployed. So scanning of those servers, scanning of your configurations, auditing of those configurations comes into picture as a part of this. And then definitely running some, if you want to go fast paced, then you can always integrate some dynamic analyzer after your CD part has been done, right? So you can automate the whole CI/CD pipeline from a security perspective.
Thank you. Ashish, the last question that is for you is, can you briefly talk about the skill mapping opportunity and business outcome perspective when it comes to when we're looking at the cloud security solutions?
So skill mapping for people looking for opportunities?
What is the skill mapping opportunity as far as cloud security is concerned in the industry, and from a business outcome perspective, how do you see cloud security solutions?
So from a skill mapping perspective, there are multiple. So I'll just give you a quick overview. I have a lot of folks in our teams who come from, pen testing backgrounds, who come from, traditional network security backgrounds, but I think everybody is quickly sort of transitioned to the cloud. The fundamentals still remain the same. The applications which were being developed, of course, being modified into modern app stacks in terms of they're either microservices-based applications and stuff like that, but the fundamentals remain the same. You got to protect your infrastructure, you got to protect your network, you got to protect your applications. It's just the approaches have changed from I will set up, boxes or probably cloud delivered services which have some kind of an intervention in between, like the CDNs, etc., where they're looking into requests to how do I sort of fix the infrastructure itself, for which you need to have an understanding of the cloud itself. So the better the understanding you have of your AWS infrastructure and how do you sort of architect it in sort of a well-architected approach, then it's better. And then, of course, you need to understand the entire paradigm of it, right? From end to end, right from what Nitin was talking about, from your SaaS tools where you're scanning your code to you're scanning your, operating system frameworks. And then you're, of course, protecting your infrastructure, and then you're protecting your application. So end to end, pieces is what you need to understand from a security perspective, all of the components. And then from a business outcome perspective, cloud's here to stay. It's only going to grow. India is a huge consumer of, your CSPs, be it AWS, Azure, and AWS, of course, leading the stack. This is only going to grow, right? So the more the businesses adopt these clouds, the more the need for securing these cloud infrastructures, especially. And as Mo Engage was mentioning, right, this is a business enabler. It's no longer a cost anymore. So you need to ensure that your cloud is secure. The CSPs, of course, are responsible for your infrastructure uptime. But when you look at the shared security model, it's the customer who's responsible for sort of securing all of their deployments in the cloud. It's their infrastructure at the end of the day. It's their workloads at the end of the day. So to ensure you run your business with absolute business continuity, security plays an integral part and works hand in glove with the development phases as well as the, the product rollout phases, as much as everything else in the business. And it's a true business driver today, is what I would say.
Yeah. Nitin, you also wanted to add to this question?
Sure. So the primary query was with respect to the skill mapping, right? And all the stuff around the cloud security. So the way we do at MoEngage, right, we have a two set of profiles or roles to handle these type of things. One is your security operations, or you can call it as cloud security operations team, who work closely with your cloud operations team or cloud computing or cloud, sometimes call it SRE team also, right, to ensure all the cloud components and the security of it, conflict plane monitoring and everything around it. And another set of role is your DevSecOps team, right, where they talk, I'll say, work closely with the DevOps team as well as your development team, because they have to ensure security in your or CI/CD pipeline or deployment pipelines or integration pipelines itself, right? So two set of roles which are quite important in the cloud security prospect. One is SecOps, then DevSecOps. Now, from the SecOps point of view, since they are dealing with all these cloud components, a lot of automations are required, dealing with the APIs, integration with multiple tools and controls are required. So definitely some sort of scripting understanding and the stuff around it is definitely required from that prospect, definitely along with understanding of the cloud environment itself. And then when we talk about the DevSecOps part, so definitely a person should be having some understanding on development processes. They should be aware of all these DevOps tools, like whatever your CI tools or CD tools and all the stuff around it, right? So you can segregate the skills around your cloud security requirements.
Thank you so much, Nitin, for giving your perspective around that. And with that, I would like to wrap up this session. Thank you so much for this great conversation, Nitin and Ashish. And I hope there are a lot of key takeaways for the attendees to go back with. From my side, all I'd like to add is that managing multi-cloud environment security can be quite complex. However, it needs to be uncomplicated, and uncomplicating this requires a platform-based approach, which provides a single pane of view across the entire cloud environment to give the visibility and the controls and the monitoring that is required without complicating it, and while keeping the investments and ROI in place. So with that, thank you so much, everyone, for the time, for attending the session, and to both our speakers for the time for giving us for the session. And with that, thank you so much, everyone, and hope you have a great day ahead.
Thanks, Shipra.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Nitin.
Thank you.